all sessions, and I will send out the recording. I will prepare it and send it out along with the final PDFs, the one I actually use. I sent you out the first draft. I know Steve said he looked at them, and but I'm always making edits and stuff. So this one will have a few of the final things that you'll get, and I will stick around once we're done. We'll run just about an hour, maybe a couple minutes longer, and I will stick around afterwards for as long as anybody wants to stick around and talk. That's one of the ways I try to be supportive of you. Let's see, what else did I have here? Oh, for those of you who don't know me, this is, depending on how you count, either my third, fourth, or fifth career, because I kept on switching around. But my first degree is in civil engineering from Boston, from Northeastern University. Yeah, I see. Beth was up there recently for quite a while.
Going back next week.
Oh, you go back next week. I love Boston. You know, as a college student with no money, it was great because when you wanted to go on a date, the art museum was 2 blocks away and free on Tuesday.
Come on.
And Symphony Hall was 1 block away and was free for any dress rehearsals. So you could do a lot. And the Boston Bruins sometimes practice in our ice hockey rink with no cost. So
that's true.
You know, but anyway, my second degree is in city planning from Cornell University. And one of the things you will hear is my love of numbers and research and stuff out of the engineering side of me, and my love of asking what influences people to do what they do, which comes out of my city planning. I went to Duke University for my master's in divinity. I did do a year at Virginia Seminary, but my degree is actually from Duke, and that really helps in what we're doing because Duke is a graduate school, not a seminary. So even though it's probably 60% Methodist students, there's a wide variety, including atheists who are there just studying to get a degree. So the conversations in the seminars were much broader than we got at Virginia Seminary when people, let's say, were a little hesitant to express anything that wasn't straight Episcopal thought. We had a lot of fun. In fact, one of my favorite stories, I should say this for later, but I won't, is one day about 4 or 5 of us Episcopalians were sitting in the coffee area, and a bunch of Methodist student pastors, those who were pastors at Methodist churches, came in and surrounded us. And they said, "Tell us about this Ash Wednesday thing. We keep getting questions." Well, being the kind, considerate person I am, I had them convinced it was cigar ashes and they had to smoke the cigar. And my best friend started laughing and ruined everything. So anyway, Duke was really helpful for the things we're going to talk about now, because most of the people we deal with, probably 98%, won't be Episcopalian, won't even have it. But we are right now Shirley and I are right now attending a Lutheran church, and that's a long story, but there's 2 implications of that for what we're doing that I want to call out. And one is that denominational loyalty is definitely at an all-time low. People don't move to town and the first thing they do is look up Episcopal on Google. The good news about that, since Episcopalians are such a small percentage of the population, is that also means a Lutheran, a Methodist, a Baptist, an evangelical will consider us if we give them a reason to.
And the Catholics.
And Catholics, particularly Catholics. We're going to talk about that a lot. The second implication of it is we were sitting in the pew maybe 4 or 5 minutes when Shirley elbowed me, I still have bruises, and said that we're staying. Now, in our case, it was because of the music. We love the music, wonderful music. But the point is that many, many, many people make their decision, if subconsciously, in the first few minutes. It's, you know, I hate to say it to us preachers, but a lot of time the decision's been made before they get to our sermon, you know, and unless we really are terrible or fantastic, that doesn't have as big of an implication as the welcome, the way the service feels, that kind of thing. And that really says a lot when we get to the point about what we do on the day of the service or other events. We'll talk about that, how important those first few minutes are. They really establish the pattern, and people know then what it is that they have a feel for us. And one of the problems for us as Episcopalians, and go back and look at your bulletin after I say this, the first 4 minutes of the Episcopal service is the most confusing 4 minutes of any worship service. You go from the bulletin to the hymnal to the prayer book, back to the bulletin to find the insert for the prayer of the day. Then you have to figure out what an S hymn is. And then you're back. You know, if you don't get lost in the first couple, 3-4 minutes, you're amazing. And, you know, and again, that has implications for us. And one of the things I talk about a lot is that the host, and I don't use the word greeter, I use the word host, we need to acknowledge that. It's helpful. One of the things I recommend is that the host ask the question, are you familiar with the Episcopal service? And just phrase it that way. And then you can go ahead, and if they say no, you can make a kind of a joke about it and just say, unless you've got the full service up on the screen or in the bulletin, that don't be surprised if you're confused, particularly in the first few minutes. We are too. And just, it's called normalizing in pastoral care, making it people understand they're all right. And I've started without praying. So let us pray. Blessed and loving Lord, we thank you for trusting us with the ministry of helping people know your love better. Now we ask you to guide us, inspire us, empower us to reach out to these people and do the ministry you want us to do. Amen.
Amen.
All right, if you will mute yourself, I'll jump over to the screen share. Let's see. Come on, screen share. There we go. And slideshow. From beginning. Knock that down. All right. I as Beth knows, I use kind of different phrases, it seems, every time I do this, but this is the one I kind of like, that we want people to no longer be shadowy figures that are walking by us. We want them to be friends, and that means they have faces and names. All right, come on, go down. All right, I've had this problem with this before. Let me see if I can make it move. Okay. Our goals for today is, I hope when we're done, you will believe there are people near you who are willing to talk about spirituality. And lots of people don't believe that. We'll talk about that some. And you will have a better understanding is that what we need to do is build a relationship with those people. You will understand and accept that about 90% of this needs to be done by the laity and not the clergy. And your fear that this is too difficult and expensive will disappear. It's not. What will not happen, you will not be asked to stop random people on the street or knock on random doors, and you will not be expected to be able to explain salvation theory or the Trinity to anyone. Now, what we're going through today is a summary, and then you'll see at the end, I have the schedule. There are 3 phases or stages, and we will dig into each one of those in a separate video, separate Zoom over the next 4 weeks. Our agenda is to look at our goals, to ask why people don't love us, to ask if any of this is worth our time, back to no one is interested. We'll talk about the overall process. We'll talk about how to build relationships, how to get contact information, and how to intrigue people enough to pay attention. And I'm going to talk about that word intrigue a lot. And then we have some final thoughts. And so our goals are not to increase attendance or budget. Jesus never said anything about those things. And maybe most important, when we focus on attendance, we're focusing on doing something for our benefit. We're being selfish. And that people feel that. People know that. Rather, our goals are to help other people grow closer to God. And if we do that, if we show God's love in that way, it's very likely that our attendance and our budget will improve. So the effort, all over, kind of in very broad terms, is to actively seek to connect with people we do not know. That's the intrigue part. Invite them to something, and particularly special activities. It might include Sunday, but we'll talk about that. And continue to build relationships with them for months, maybe even years. It takes time. Now, one of the biggest problems we'll face is leadership in the church that becomes discouraged because after a short time, there haven't been any obvious results. We've posted twice and the pews are still empty. Don't be surprised if you hear that. Ultimately, what we're seeking is to be in a relationship strong enough that we can talk spirituality with them, and relationship requires communication over time. Maybe in some ways the most important slide, and Steve sent me something this morning that ties right into this. You will not do everything. I'm going to present to you what is basically a buffet from which you will take a couple dishes. Pick what seems most important to you and do that well, rather than spreading yourself too thin. And, and this sounds like, of course, but I need to call this out, that churches of different sizes with different resources can do different things. So if you hear of another church doing something and you're saying, oh, we got to go do that, maybe not. That may be their thing and not yours. Key point. And most of us are in congregations with people who are, let's say, over 60 years old. Many of the leadership is over 60 years old. And some of them are still living in the 50s and 60s. Back then, everyone was expected to go to church. You built a building, you opened the doors, you announced your service times, and people came, especially families. And maybe that was good, but it just isn't true anymore. I will send you a paper about how to respond to internal conflicts that come up over this. So I got a warning for you. The next few slides are likely to create some discouragement, some depression, even some despair. Please don't give up until we get through that, which would be the 6th slide. A 20-year-old could be 4th generation unchurched. Their great-grandparents were in church in the 60s. Their grandparents had children in the 70s or 80s rather, and maybe they had those children baptized to make the parents feel good, the grandparents feel good. Those people who were born in the 80s had children in the 2000s, and they never went to church. They didn't have any baptisms. And now we're looking at people who could easily be effectively 4th generation unchurched. They are not coming back. They never were. But if we focus on that person, we will have touched people who do have a church background. So one of the keys is to remember that in our environment, church is a bad word to most unchurched people. Okay, this, and up at the top, I have the link. If you want to see this research, it was paid for by the Episcopal Church. It was run by a professional organization. They, as I said, my degree is in one of my degrees is in city planning. We do a lot of this kind of stuff, and so I was able to go back and look, and it looks like a pretty good research project. And the column, not religious, no religion, I'm focusing on. It's the others are interesting because those are our unchurched people that we're pretty much looking at. And if you look, 15% of them think Christians are friendly. 11% think Christians are loving. 9% think Christians are respectful. And so on. This is kind of a summary of all that, and the right-hand column is the one I'm paying the most attention to. They were able to give multiple responses, obviously. 55% of people say Christians are hypocritical. 54 judgmental, 50 self-righteous, 36 arrogant. I guess we should be happy it's only 36. And the positives, you get down 16% is about 1 in 8 say we're giving, friendly. And the one that bothers me the most is the majority, 90% of people say we're not compassionate. I think what we're seeing there is not who we are, but our lack of explaining who we are. People don't know who we are. They're basing it rather on stories they have heard. And honestly, would you want to be part of that group of people? I wouldn't. So I'm not surprised other people don't either. This is not a true picture of your church. But the unchurched, our audience, does not know that. This is the picture they're assigning to your church. So our goal is to tell them and show them who we really are. Now, this slide is basically kind of a summary of these last couple, but I think it's a very helpful slide to look at and use working with your church. And we'll talk about this some later. But to start asking the question, how can we explain we're not hypocritical? How can we make no, and just saying we're not hypocritical doesn't do it. You have to have an example. Yeah, and if possible, a graphic that leads you into an example. And so this is a great thing. I've used it in coffee hour with Post-it notes, that game. Tell people, write something on here, stick it up next to the right one. They do not, if you do this, if you talk in your vestry meeting or wherever about these kind of things, cross off the friendly, the one at the back. Do not let people talk about that because it's the only thing they'll talk about. We want them to go deeper. Every church says it's the friendliest one in town. And the bottom in blue, a person can despise the institution, church, while loving your congregation. That's where we're going. We're not going to try to change your. I agree with them. Some churches have abused children. Some churches have abused adults. Some churches misuse money. I mean, I'm not going to deny any of that. It's absolutely true. But when you do is explain that's not our congregation. All right, now we get to some of the good news. Same survey. Actually, one of the fascinating things is 16% of people who 5% of the people who call themselves Christians do not believe Jesus was an important spiritual figure. I think that's kind of interesting. But anyway, notice that most of people do think Jesus was an important spiritual figure in history. They're willing to listen. They already have the background. They already have the opening. So very briefly, is this can we get people's attention? Well, very briefly, about 90% of Americans believe there is a higher power. Now, a tiny percentage of those are into crystals or astrology or whatever. Most of them are into something we would call a god. And this, you get all kinds of variation depending on definitions, but somewhere in the 25 to 35% of Americans have a fulfilling spiritual home. Notice I didn't say church. I said fulfilling spiritual home. So what we have is many Americans believe in a higher power, but will not do anything to deepen their spiritual lives. Well, what that means is we have about 1 in 3 Americans who believe in God, have some interest in deepening their spiritual lives, and will talk to us if they know the conversation will be done respectfully. I think Steve said that there are 41,000 people living within a short distance of your church. So something around 13,000 people living within a short distance of Church of the Atonement would be willing to have a conversation if they felt it could be done in a safe way. Some communication principles. First one is really important. It frustrates the heck out of preachers, but it's absolutely true. It does not matter what you say. It only matters what they hear. I think most preachers have had the examples of people coming up to the handshake line and saying something about the sermon, and you saying, I never said that. Well, the same thing goes here. We need to be careful on what we say. Clarity of conversation is essential. So a couple quick thoughts about language. I mentioned church is not a good word. It's because it's heard as the institution. We always say the church is the people. Well, it isn't. That's not how we use the word. If I say I'm going to the church, I mean I'm going to the building. If I say I got my check from the church, I mean I got the check from the institution. And people are not anxious to associate with an institution. So I try to use the term spiritual communities. And when I'm talking about a specific one, I use congregations. Or like I just did with atonement, I might use the actual name of the congregation. People want to associate with other people. And you're going to hear me say that a lot. People want to associate with other people. Unchurched is another word that I try to stay away from because it's focused on us. It's not focused on the other person. We're talking about, when we say somebody's unchurched, we're saying they're excluded from us rather than talking about who they are. Now, I've not found a good substitute for it, so I'll say something like people seeking a spiritual community. Visitor, you will never, never, never have a visitor. If you can get that into your psyche, you'll have accomplished most of what you need to accomplish. You will always have guests. And if you wonder why I'm saying that, consider how you treat a guest at your house versus a simple visitor like somebody like the UPS delivery man is a visitor. How do you treat the neighbor down the street who you've invited to your house? Very differently. Greeter is not a bad word as long as we understand that person only greets. A host has a much broader role. We'll talk about that a lot, and I'll send you a link to a training video. First time with us, and I use this lots of times until somebody pointed out to me it's not accurate because many guests come multiple times before making a commitment. So if I say if this is your first time with us, I'm excluding the person who came last week or a month ago. New with us is a better phrase. And finally, we need to avoid jargon as much as possible. And I define jargon as any word or phrase you have not used outside a church conversation in the last 2 weeks. So think about some of them. Narthex, Eucharist, Incarnation, BCP. And one of the worst ones we do is we use words like the Bible study is in the Jones Memorial Library Annex. Who knows where that, even some of your members don't know where that is. Another jargon that we use a lot is if you want more information, ask Judy. Who's Judy? So anyway, the way to handle this is to teach. I'm not suggesting we eliminate these words. Teach them. The information is in the narthex, the lobby. The Eucharist, communion is central to our worship. The question to ask And like I say, this is one of those things you'll probably get some opposition about. People will say, well, if they stay around, they'll know all these words. The question to ask is, do you care if non-Episcopalians understand? Because confusion projects the feeling that we don't care about them. All right, another principle, one of the most important, is that people decide based primarily on impression, not data. And one of my favorite examples of that is to ask you where your favorite doctor graduated from, what their specialty was, and even more important, when was the last time they did any research or training on the condition you're talking to them about or the drug you're asking about? You have an impression that you trust this person, they're trustworthy, you like them. That's where you make your decision, not necessarily on data. We would probably get more data about somebody we were interviewing for a secretarial position than we get about somebody the doctor we're choosing. All right, if there's one number you remember, you have half a second to make an initial impression. Think about Facebook, which is where lots of people see stuff about us, and how fast people zoom through all that, scroll through it. You've got to grab their attention in about a half a second, and watch yourself sometime and you'll see what I mean. And if you grab their attention, you then have about 2 to 3 seconds for them to become minimally invested so they'll continue to look. So the majority of material has to be graphics. Now, a few explanatory words is great, but the graphics are what grab their attention, not the words. People. People do not connect with buildings or institutions. Too many churches show photos of empty buildings, and they may be beautiful buildings. That's not what interests people. Maybe if they're an architectural student, they might come in one time. Because when we show an empty building, what we're saying is no people are connected to this place, or that's the impression we're given. And again, remember, impression versus data. And one of the worst places is at the opening of the online, the service video, the live stream. Most of us, when we're doing that, we want to start a few seconds early, a couple minutes early, make sure everything's working. Well, the only thing on at that moment is the altar guild member checking the candles. And somebody signs in, what they see is a bunch of empty pews. Got to work on that. I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to do better. This is an example of a church. I love what they do. They do a jazz Compline service once a month. I love it. I zoom in and listen to it every chance I get. But notice what you see. This is the middle of the service, and they're actually, if you on the upper level, there's actually somebody hiding behind one of the pillars. There are 3 people that you can see. Now, as a matter of fact, there were a lot more people that if you listen to it, you could hear their voices, but like good Episcopalians, they were sitting in the back. But if I just checked out this photo, I would say there's nobody interested in what's going on here. This is another better example. This is a church in Smithfield, North Carolina. Among other, not only does it show lots of people and lots of interest, but if you have this up, I can guarantee to you that when it pops up on somebody's post or wherever, they're going to stop and they're going to look and see if they know anybody. People are interested in people. And this is what we did with theirs. We actually put on their front page. This is their front page of their Facebook, and we phrased it waiting to welcome you. So a little bit of information, but not much. Mainly the people's faces. And notice the children are down in the front, and I love the fact at least a couple of the children are misbehaving. That says something about the church. All right, so how do we do it? How do we become friends with people? And that people must, first of all, know us, like us, trust us. Only then will they interact with us in some minimal way, and then they may relate to us. And this can be quick. Usually it's quick by people who have a church history, Episcopalian or otherwise. People who maybe went to church all their lives but they kind of drifted away and now they're at the age they want to come back type of thing. It might happen quickly with someone like that. But for most people, it takes time. But the first step is they have to be intrigued. There are literally several hundred things you could learn about today. We need them to choose to learn about our church, which means we got to intrigue them to spend the time. That's the major step we make. Chronologically, the stages are intrigue them, which is introducing ourselves and then inviting them. Stage 2 is when they do arrive at some event. Now, this could be, and I'll talk about this, electronic or it could be in person. And it may include worship services, but typically that's one of the last places you interact. And then you build a relationship that grows to the point that a spiritual conversation is possible. But that's chronological. The importance is the other way. Because if we don't build a relationship, we have wasted everything that happened before. If they just decide that this was okay, but they're not connected to us. And if we don't interact with them, we have wasted our efforts to intrigue them. And if we don't intrigue them and introduce ourselves, nothing's going to happen. And for example, many churches advertise their services and are surprised they don't grow. Over and over and over again, I see that and I don't have my notes about atonement, so I can't tell you. I think I sent Steve or I sent all of you some notes about what I saw. I think, as I recall, it was pretty good. But people aren't just waiting to know what time your service is and then they're going to come rushing in. And yet that's what most churches do. And we'll discuss these actually in priority order, not chronological. All right, this is an overview, and we're going to have separate Zooms where we're going to go into details. And stage 3 is to build a relationship. Remembering they have full calendars, they have long established habits, and they have embedded skepticism. They don't believe the church is necessarily a good thing. And most important, remember, we must take the lead. We can't count on them coming to us. And I strongly recommend weekly text, short, informative, sometimes funny, never pushy. We want conversation. We want to be friends, and that's the way we want to do it. And I suggest the text for 2 reasons. One is emails are glanced at about 20% of the time, and and some of those times they aren't actually read. They're just glanced at. Whereas research says that texts are looked at and read about 90+% of the time, partially because they're short. And that's the other advantage of text. We can't get verbose. We got to pick something, tell them about that, and quit. And that makes people want to look at next week's because they know they're not going to be tied up for an hour. And I'm not going to go through these. They're on your PDF, but these are a bunch of ones we've used. I tried to pick ones that had a variety of reasons, outreach, couple worship, some things explaining the Episcopal Church, the type of things you can use. And I'm working with some churches and have space for a couple more. Basically, you provide the contact information, you approve all texts, I'll do the work and pay the bill. Let me know if you want more information. I'd love to work with you. Atonement has so much to offer, and Comfort does too. I know this sounds like a crazy scam, but this is my passion, is to help people know God's love. And the way I can do that with my gifts, talents, skills is to help you. So I'll do whatever I can. What do we ask for? We need the name and the phone number and or email, but nothing else. And I say that because the more we ask for, the fewer people will answer. And the key is to ask. One of the phrases you'll hear me use a lot is be assertive, but never aggressive. And I know I did it for God knows how many years, put the guest book in the narthex and thought we'd get a lot of response. And we did pretty good because We had it pointed out by a host, and Shirley's going to laugh, but she was in the choir, and if I saw somebody I didn't know, I called them out to her. When she came up to communion, I would whisper, "Lady in blue dress sitting in the back left," and then the body of Christ. and her job was to run to the back and make sure she got to know the person. But anyway, notice what a guest book in the narthex is. If you ask them to fill it out as they walk in, it's like asking a person to review the restaurant before they're even seated. That's a little weird. And I've got a slide coming up where I'll explain all this, and I hope you'll look at it. This one here. You have it, you can print it out and look at it. But basically what you want to do is make it convenient for the people. And it's little things, like use wide lines and heavyweight paper so it's easy to write on. And to tell them you will not share. We've been using the donor to give in our case it was $5 to the food pantry. That can help. Provide options to filling them in, and this is particularly important for young adults. A QR code on the form which sends them to the sign-in page, not to the front of your website. A text name to number. Text your name to this number and we'll be in touch. We just finished an event, and I'm trying to remember, I think we ended up with 7 people providing contact information, 3 of whom did it through the name to the number. And I texted the 3 of them, and they're all now on our regular contact list. Again, ask. Hosts can mention the form in the pew, and I will send you a video. The worship leader can ask after the piece, and that's another video I'll send you, and I really like this. And we're working on something about making it very easy for you to run a banner during live stream, and this can be good to get donations. If somebody wonders why you're doing it, tell them you'll get money. That usually answers the vestry's questions. I love this. This is actually a large church in Greensboro, North Carolina, Holy Trinity. They just put cup hooks on the back of their pews, and they use the screw-in types. They could be just the glue types, and hang the card from there. So it's always immediately available. And one of the reasons I love this is they leave it there all the time, which means, have you ever thought of the time when the greatest number of unchurched people come to your church? It's a funeral or a wedding. And you're not going to ask them to fill out the guest book in the narthex. But if these forms are in the pews, and if they have any interest, they can do it. All right, stage 2. Offer activities that are interesting for people to attend and feel safe to people who are cautious. And the word cautious is probably understating. And during those activities, make sure people feel warmly welcome but not harassed. And that's a very difficult balancing act sometimes. Comfortable. You want them to leave feeling glad they came. Again, we never have a visitor. We only have guests. We never greet. We only host. Priority 1, they have an enjoyable time or an inspiring time if that's the kind of activity we're talking about. Priority 2, we get their contact information. Again, primarily name and phone number. Do not ask for too much. Because if we don't get their contact information, we have no influence, no way to influence them on their decision to return. All we can do is hope and pray. With their contact information, we can influence their decision. Offer activities that are interesting and feel safe. And for safe, and again, for the person who grew up in the church, the worship service may feel fine, but for people who didn't, or who have left the church angry, which is an awful lot of people, that's not a worship service. They want something they can leave with no problem and no embarrassment. Example, if you do the blessing of backpack before the beginning of church, beginning of school, think about doing it during the worship service when 99% of us do it, versus doing it in an evening with ice cream. and reaching out to the teachers and the administrators and all that. Very different feel. A lot of what you're already doing can be tweaked into an event the community can participate in. The burning of palms for Palm Sunday, and I'll talk more about that. I think that's really a neat thing that most people don't do publicly. Shrove Tuesday, Lent studies, Lenten evening prayer, Easter egg hunt, and again, specifically not linked to a service, not immediately after the service or immediately before. And what else might you do? And I'd love to hear your ideas. What have you done? What would you wish you could do that the community might participate in? We have a couple churches that do Jay's services regularly. We have several churches that have a labyrinth. What can we do to invite people to come to it? Do some kind of, maybe 3 times a year, do a special day for a special reason. We had a lot of fun on betting on things like the football championship, the Super Bowl, or the NBA championship by telling people to come contribute food in their team's name. Had a lot of fun with that and got some publicity. Again, I always make a point of showing this up several times because I've already mentioned, I don't know how many, a couple dozen things. And I don't want anybody feeling, oh, wow, I'm overwhelmed. Do what you can. You're not going to be able to do them all. My personal way of dealing with things is if I see something I really like, but I know I can't do it right away, rather than trying to crush it into my schedule, I actually get on my calendar and I put it for next year or something and kind of takes the pressure off of me. That's my way of dealing with it. Do not overwhelm yourself. And again, this is not the clergy's ministry. The clergy has a role and they'll be involved and hopefully, making decisions and everything, but they cannot be the lead and get a whole lot done. I have training videos, written material, lots of stuff for everything that's been mentioned. I want you to understand you will never be alone. And as you talk to other people, try to get other people involved. Make sure to stress that. All right, stage 1, the intrigue stage. We're reaching out to anonymous people and friends to intrigue them to listen to our story and then gradually build a relationship. You might as well assume the viewer, the listener, is critical of church. Start from there. The people who are not critical of church will still hear the message. Again, at any moment, the process is a different place for every person, so that's why we'll actually be doing several things simultaneously. Look for ways to get their contact information. And for example, a great way is to post on Facebook or wherever a request for prayers that they can request prayers from the church. Questions are always good. One great one before Christmas was, what is your favorite Christmas carol? People respond to that kind of thing. Another one is be sneaky. I just saw some good examples. I'll show them when we get into the detail on Zoom on this. But you can ask a question on social media and members provide a couple of responses. Like, particularly if you're dealing with a Facebook group, you could say, and this is a real life example, is there any church in our town who will let a gay person attend? You'd be surprised at the number of good responses we got to that. There's a whole list of videos you can share. Again, prayer requests, memes. If you don't know, if you've never done it, Google Episcopal Church memes. There are literally hundreds of good ones. And most of all, we want to talk about what's happening here at the church, but do it without bragging. So, for example, it's great if you can get somebody, if you have a food pantry at your church or you're helping at a food pantry, if you can get a recipient from the back to talk about what it means for them to get food and tell them you do not want to hear the words, thank you. You just want to hear the impressions of it. Lots of possibilities. Again, I want to point out 90% of what we do needs to be graphics, the 5-second rule. the 3 to 5 second rule, always people. Social media is the easiest, most effective method, and Facebook is the easiest one to work with. And yes, there's not a whole lot of 20-year-olds on it, but the 20-year-olds are spread between TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, and ones I have never heard of. That it takes a lot more effort to reach them. I'll talk about some ways we can do that, but Facebook gets some 20-year-olds, and there's other things we can do, but Facebook is just the easiest one to work with. Most important, and the biggest challenge, is that wonderful post you prepared to show on your church page is not shown to all your members, and certainly not to any future friends. We have to be more aggressive about reaching out to them. And in this case, I do mean aggressive. If a member will comment and share, it will be shown to their friends. Look at your Facebook page. I know Atonement had very, very few shares. My suspicion, without having gone through it, is they're probably all from the same person or two people. If people will comment and share, Facebook concludes it's of great interest and starts showing it more broadly. It is easy to reach thousands of people who live nearby for free. And I can help you set up a system. What you're doing is looking for people to invest no more than 5 minutes a week to help their church. Nextdoor.com also has great potential, and I will send you something about how to use that the easiest way. It's a little tricky. You got to be careful, but with just a little bit of effort, it can be very effective. That all said, the most important where to go, and I will send you a training video. I'm not going to send these all to you at one time. I'm going to space them out. Is Facebook groups. This is just 2 in Smithfield, North Carolina. 4.5 people. Now there's probably some overlap. So unique, it's probably something like 3,000 people will see a post presented on one of these group pages. And I looked up for Atonement, and there's some good groups near you. Now, again, there's things, and I'll show you what to do. The 10 posts a day is actually a danger sign, because that means yours is very easy will very quickly get to the bottom, but there's some things you can do to help with that. The bottom line is, like physical rehab, and we were talking about this before, it will work if the work is done. So it's important to have a team. If there's only one person, and we don't have that situation here, but in some churches we have, and I'm perfectly happy to meet with the church leadership, usually through Zoom. That could be the vestry. It could be more people. And because there are people who believe this is a waste of time, there are people who believe this is not the way Episcopalians do it. And that's historically true. Episcopal Church nationwide has dropped over 20% in the 9 years prior to COVID. So maybe it's time to consider doing things differently. So what do you need to do first? Pray. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Expand your team. No matter how big it is, there's always great to have more. And new guests are great to have because they have new eyes. They see things you won't see. People with mobility limitations, shut in or primarily shut in. Vestry members. My vestry knew they were good. If they ran for election and got elected, they were going to be told to do work. Daughters of the King, Brotherhood of St. Andrew, both take vows to do this kind of thing. Most important, they set up your system to connect with people whose contact information you have, but who've not become involved. And you can go back a year. If you've got contact information from people who were there a year ago and you haven't seen them since, let's give it a try. And some people have actually have done that. Some churches have done it and have had good results. And look at how you're asking people to provide their contact information. Are you doing it in a way that's best for you? All right, here are the Zooms and the focus that each will have. I have in blue our calendar because this is the season. and particularly Shrove Tuesday, Ash Wednesday that week, and I'm going to talk about burning the palms. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And then Lent, this may be the best season of the church. I think it is the best season of the church year to reach out to new people. And it's coming on us fast. So we need to be ready. And that's why I'm running these next 3 Zooms so quickly, but tried to give you some of the basics as we went through. Please know, everything I've talked about is actually very simple. There's not a thing here that's difficult. The most difficult thing I've talked about is putting an announcement on your live stream, and I will be soon presenting you with a 15-minute training session that will show you how easy it is to do that. Do what you can and then stop. Not overwhelm yourself. And again, I will happily talk with anyone to help them. And finally, most important, of course, is pray. I lost that screen. And we're not praying that other people be changed. We're not praying that other people come to our church. We're praying that we be the people God wants us to be, that we do the ministry God wants us and needs us to do. So being part of our community is the right thing for those people. And I think that's really an important distinction, that we're praying for us to change so that we're effective to them. All right, let me stop the share and expand the view to the gallery and open for questions, discussions, challenges, whatever. And I get to drink my coffee.
Ken, I wanted to mention that I believe Steve said, how can we do a needs survey so that we know which events will fly, which ones will work?
Good question. What I would suggest is rather than trying to survey your area, and the one place, I'll tell you the one different place I do on that is I will be providing information about what's worked at other churches. That's probably the best way to decide what may work at yours. The one exception is your population of inactive Roman Catholics. I would suggest in Massachusetts that you put a little more emphasis on reaching out to inactive Roman Catholics than the church in Boulder, Colorado. You're going to have more of them. All right. Not suggesting they don't do any. And one of them one of the really important ones. See, my mother was Roman Catholic. All right. We went to Dutch Reform, Lutheran, Congregational, Methodist churches. We never owned a car, so we went to the church we could walk to all through life. She died a Roman Catholic. If you grow up Roman Catholic, you're always Roman Catholic. And sacraments are particularly important, and Ash Wednesday is particularly important. That's one of those days they just feel bad if they don't have a chance. They don't know. That's a broad statement. Many don't know they can get communion at the Episcopal Church. Many don't know they can get ashes at the Episcopal Church. So one of the things I'll be talking about, and I think it's fantastic. If you're interested in doing this before I get to it, fine, let me know. I'll be happy to send you the information. And a number of churches have done is a little short, and I used to say video. I think slideshow with audio under it works actually better. From your church talking about communion. 2 minutes maximum. But what you're doing is you're reaching out to two demographics. You're reaching out to those who don't think they can get communion at your church. You're making that clear. The other demographic you're reaching out is to the Baptists, the evangelicals, who all they know about communion is what they've heard about Roman Catholics. And they're there going, well, that's not really blood, Like I said, I grew up congregational and I had Roman Catholic friends and I used to hassle them a lot about that. So I can touch base with that. So we can explain our understanding of communion. And then we make that video available or slideshow or whatever. through the groups, through Facebook. That's one I would spend the money to boost. And for $30, you can get basically $30 will get you in front of 3,000 accounts. And that's pretty standard. It usually is about a penny an account. Yeah, Sandy.
So Ken, just a question about boosting. So we do something called Kids Night Out.
Yeah.
And parents drop their kids off for an hour and a half. We feed them, we play with them, we have a great time. The kids have a night out, the parents have a night out. We've
Great.
done it twice and it's been really successful. And maybe a third of the children that come are associated with the church in some way.
Okay.
The rest, Boys and Girls Club, the neighborhood, that kind of thing. So we're continuing that and really enjoying it. I boosted that. And in boosting it, someone got a hold of my credit card and charged up $900 worth of charges off of that boost on Facebook. So I'm really reticent to, and I recovered about half of that.
I have no idea how they can pull, I
have no
realize the
idea
people
either, and I
can't.
boosted before for other things.
Yeah.
But now I'm really reticent
Yeah.
to do that at all.
Well, let me make a couple suggestions to you.
And Facebook was no help.
Yeah.
You can't
Couple
get a hold of
suggestions.
Facebook, nothing. And I'm not a virgin with this.
Mhm.
Pardon the pun. But there's we're looking for kind of other ways to do that. In the
If you're
community.
concerned about that, my first suggestion is get a new credit card with a $200 max. Then they can't.
Yeah.
The other thing I always do, and the pros will recommend this. Facebook allows you to set your budget a couple different ways. I always set a maximum budget for that boost.
I learned that.
And I have a maximum budget for my account.
It was a hard way to learn it, but
Yes.
I learned that now.
But we did that with our kids. We gave them a credit card, but it only had like $100.
yeah.
What they were
Good
told
suggestion,
is
thank you.
if they ever get arrested, the bond better be less than that because otherwise they're staying there.
Thanks.
But the other thing I would strongly suggest to consider is you're bringing in, this is fantastic, you're bringing in these kids and their parents to this event. Make sure they leave there knowing more about your church. And you probably want to do that subtly.
Yeah.
But for example, you could have off to the side, not in their face, here's what we do in Sunday school type of thing.
Yeah, we actually send them out with we didn't do this the last time, and I don't know why we didn't, but we typically send them out with it was great to have your kid with us. Here's what, here's something that we know about your child because, they taught us this about themselves.
Good.
And then had information about the church on it. So
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Make sure you're also asking for their would you, and I'll talk about this later. I
they
think
have
it's
to
important.
register, so we have their contact information.
Good.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but I think it's really important, not just here, but anytime. Most of us, and again, me, will say, please give us your contact information so we can send you more. Well, what we've done there is we've asked them to do something. That first thing we've done is say to them, do something for us. So I've flipped that around and said, we would love to send you information or keep you informed about what's happening here. If you're interested, please leave your information. It's subtle, but it's offering first and asking second. And I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And when you do get their information, that's something you might want to ask. I would not, for what you're doing, automatically put them on a church mailing list.
No, we don't.
But I would ask them if they'd like to be. And my suspicion is you will get more than you expect. Say yes.
Yeah.
Particularly when you look at the slide on that, you'll see some of the things I say, like, for example, we will not share your information. That's a biggie right now, as you pointed out with the credit
Great
card.
suggestions.
Yeah. And I really like the $5 to the food pantry.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things, you have somebody in your congregation that contributes to the food pantry or the shelter for dogs or whatever on a regular basis. Just ask them if you can use their you know, you don't even have to spend any more money. Use their contribution as for that reason. But again, my relationship with my vestry was not typical. If we were doing this, I would go to my vestry and I say, I want $5 from each one of you.
I'm sorry, I need to just step away for a second.
Okay. But
Hi, this is Reverend
I would say to them, I'm, you know, you're leaders. I'm counting on you leading, you know, and get that money. I'll talk about this some on the pancake supper too. One of the things I like, and I'll send you some details on this. I think it's really important to charge the members, even if it's nominal, so that the guest feels special. The guest is getting something no one else is getting, a free dinner. And, you know, we can offer everybody a free dinner, but then the guest is just like everybody else. And what I did is I went to the congregation and I said, I'm expecting 3 to 5 families at $10 a person, a family. I need people to contribute $10. And if I'll, you know, and just did it that way. And we were covered. Now I can remember a couple years I had to dip into my discretionary fund, and because what we were doing, we used ours typically to raise money for the youth group. So I didn't want to cheat the youth group. I want to make sure they got their $10. So if no one else volunteered, I put the money up. But it just made them feel special. Just a way to make them feel special. They walk in and there's a you know, place to pay, and they're told, no, you don't have to pay. Go on.
Mhm.
You know, that just, hey,
Yeah.
these are neat people.
Okay, it's Steve here.
Steve.
Yes, Sandy and I have been talking about small groups in Lent.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully small groups that people who come for whatever it is, Shrove Tuesday, Ashes, communion, all the things we've been talking about on Ash Wednesday. Then for those who are wanting to at least try out going deeper into spiritual life, to have a group, some meeting in the church, some home-based for folks who are still allergic to the building.
Yeah.
But we've had, we were just brainstorming many ideas on what that 6-week study could be about.
Mm-hmm.
She talked to somebody, a former Catholic, who wanted to know what's in the Book of Common Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a former Catholic who wanted to know what was in the Bible.
Yep.
But they're both together.
Right. Then we are now in the lectionary year of Matthew. We could do the story of Jesus in Matthew. I had the idea of a Bible study based on love, because there's so many people who think the Bible's about judgment and hell and not love. So we had all kinds of ideas that we threw out, and I have no idea how to figure out which is the best idea.
Well, let me suggest another question to ask, which is, and I don't have an answer. This is what you want to do. Is it better to do a 6-week series or 6 independent ones? You know, even if you do a 6-week period, I would try to keep them somewhat. Asking people to commit for 6 weeks who aren't necessarily is a big step.
Right.
Second thing I point out is do not offer a Bible study on Matthew. That's boring. Find something interesting about Matthew and offer the Bible study about that. I'm going to show you, I don't know if it's the next Zoom, maybe. Anyway, one of the Zooms, I will show you some stuff that our pastor did. And he had things like, who are the most, what was his exact phrases? Shirley, if you remember, jump in. Who are the most interesting characters in the Gospel of John? You know, okay, there, and question, always use questions, never statements. Think about it yourself. Again, listen to conversations around you. When there's a question mark, that engages you. When there's a period, that's a question mark is a connection between two people. A period is just one person, which may or may not end up connecting,
Ken,
but it doesn't start that way.
I don't think he didn't use the word bizarre, but what his question was more like, who are the most bizarre characters in the book of, so if you say who are the most interesting characters, well, okay, la-di-da, but it was something, that you did not normally associate with biblical people, and you're going like, okay, hello, full stop, and you look at that. So it made you think about it more.
Yeah.
And of course, it was amusing.
One of my favorite courses in seminary I took because the title just drew me in. It was Teaching and Preaching Texts of Terror. And
There you go.
Yeah. It was a great class.
Yeah. I would not do the Book of Common Prayer. What I might do for that person
It
is
wasn't just that person. It was about 6 people. We have a lot of former Roman Catholics, but honestly, the people, when we started talking about it, the people that wanted to know more were people who were cradle Episcopalians who had been given a Book of Common Prayer at their when they were confirmed, and never looked beyond the Eucharist, the baptism, and so it may only be 2 sessions.
Yeah.
And the other piece was, do Episcopalians really know the Bible? No. I thought, well, have you looked at the Book of Common Prayer? So, and not in an academic way, but there was a real request from multiple people to do that. Doesn't have to be the only thing going on.
Yeah, well, my point only is that's not likely to reach people who aren't already connected with the Episcopal Church in some way.
Understood.
I was laughing because I really like having the complete service in the bulletin as a friendly thing, but I hate. Okay, I'll send you some ideas that I've seen. I don't know what yours looks like. In fact, I'll look yours up. I think you have yours posted.
It is. Don't look at this week because it was lessons and carols and.
And
we're actually working on. Steve actually gave me some good commentary this week. And thank you for the comment on my voice, Steve. I appreciate that. But we're looking at adding more in. Please stand, please sit. The things that we assume. And actually, one of them that Steve pulled out was like, I wonder. We've been singing the Holy, Holy, Holy with bells, which has been because it was kind of celebratory and the bells were there. But I wondered how people do experience it. It's very royal, it's very imperial. And I, being a cradle Episcopalian and a real music geek, I love it. And it may not be for everybody. I'm kind of a Santo, Santo, Santo girl too, so.
Well, I challenged my priest, this is way back, because he would use incense on Easter and Christmas only. And I said, look, what you're doing to the visitor, the guest, if they like incense, you're lying to them that they'll get it the rest of the year. If they don't like incense, they're not going to come back to find they're not going to get it.
Right.
It's just, you got to do something about that. But I laugh because I love that kind of bulletin. But I hate the fact you do lose the Book of Common Prayer to some extent. I learned about the Episcopal Church during boring sermons. I would pick up the Book of Common Prayer and look through it.
Well,
I'm probably one of the very few Episcopalians who's actually read the Athanasian Creed.
Okay, but before we get off of the Lenten time, I was intrigued by your idea that rather than a 6-week series that people would feel they would have to commit to make it one at a time. Do you have any examples or printouts or anything of how you do that? Because I've never done that, but it sounds like a great idea.
Well, there's 2 things that leap to mind right offhand. One is we had, and they're still around. I think you can get them from the National Church. I don't know if you ever saw, I can't remember what they called them.
Not the National
They were like
Church.
Monopoly cards.
Yeah.
And with questions on them.
Mhm.
and you were allowed to pass, but that would be a great thing. I think you could talk about, it'd be a question like something like, when have you seen God in your world, or something like that. But there were like 100 cards, so there were a lot of different ones. That would be the kind of thing, they're in question form. You could announce that we're going to get together, we're going to have coffee and snacks, and we're going to talk about these kind of things.
Mhm.
That'd be certainly one. I love the love. I like the love this theme, except I might focus each week on a different aspect of it. So, for example, one of the titles that I'm just enamored by is, does God really want me to forgive the person that abused me? You know, that raises all kinds of stuff, and getting into God's love. And another one similar around forgiveness could be, is it really possible God could forgive me and the person that abused me, or something like that? You know, and you could do, I'm not coming up with 6 topics right off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can find 6
Mhm.
around the broad theme of God's love. How is God's love shown, or what's the implication of God's love for creation care? I'm searching, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying.
Nadia Bowles-Weber just wrote a really good essay on, are we really a forgiving church if we don't advocate for rights of people who have been imprisoned and have done their time?
Mhm. Mhm.
Well,
Well, I'm trying to think of how to. I'll save that topic for another time. But yeah, but you could go through.
talk about forgiveness.
You could go through that list of negatives
Mhm.
and try to find a place where at least some of those fit. I can rule one week would be doubts and questions. Does God love me even if I have doubts and questions?
Mhm.
And my answer would be, I certainly hope so.
Mhm.
Kathy.
Yeah, I have a question, completely different topic here.
Okay.
Publishing photos of people.
Mhm.
So what is the best practice around doing that? Should we be asking permission? And these kids night out events that we have, should we be getting parents' permission to publish kids' photos if we're going to put those up?
Okay, there's several different levels to that. Okay. Kids night out, yes, my opinion. Because they're not your members.
Mhm.
Now from the back, no. If you can do it in such a way, just show a bunch of kids clustered around, all you can see is their back. That's different.
Mhm.
Your own kids, I would simply make an occasional as in every few months, announcement that we're going to take photos of the kids, and if they have any, if you the parent have any objections, please let us know. And I would say that's middle school up. All right, is me. Elementary school down, I would directly ask the parent before I showed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And the single biggest question the church faces to parents is my kid safe?
Yeah.
That's a real big issue right now. Adults is a different question. Again, I would occasionally say we take photos and post them, and it's a real pain in the butt. There's one member of our church choir who doesn't want her picture taken.
Mhm.
And I asked her one time if she was in, what do they call it? She's hiding from criminals or something. She doesn't want her picture taken, which makes taking pictures of the choir a real pain. But, why get in a fight? But the legal rule is, if you're in a public space and you're not making money off the photo, then certainly you can publish any photos of adults, and the church is a public space.
Mhm.
And as an example, think about, your newspaper or your TV. They're always putting up pictures
Mhm.
of people, and they never walked around to get their, everybody in the parades approval.
Okay.
I think that's questionable because they are making money on it. But anyway, there may
Okay.
be in the law some exception for media. I don't know, but that's the basic rule. If you're not making money on it with adults, you're okay. Although I would still announce it. I know churches that do one of those cover your rear end signs as people are walking in that says, "We may take your picture." If you have any objection, let us know. Which nobody looks at. But if you ever get in a little bit of trouble, you're theoretically covered. I don't, I think a lot depends too on your congregation. If there's somebody in your congregation who's upset about it, then I'd do a little more.
We do have a few like that, so it's good. It's good to know what
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
practice.
I would, I would make an occasional announcement. I would try to be careful that not to put theirs up on Facebook or anything. But like I said, the kids are the ones that are the real, are the real challenge.
Okay.
And like I said something about the food pantry, anytime you can do, if you're not sure, do the photo from the back or the video from the back. So all you're seeing is the back of their heads. That's safe. I mean, the other thing to watch out for is names. Don't use last names for any, even adults.
Okay.
Use only first names.
And we don't even post, we only post the church phone number and the church email. We don't post anything else. Because people can call and get the information if they need it. But there've been too many emails going out with clergy names on them fishing for money.
Our bishop has to send out a warning about once every 2 months
Yeah.
that he doesn't ask anybody to send him gift cards from Walmart, because that's around here. That's the thing. You say,
I bought a gift card at Christmas at CVS, and the clerk had me sign something, on the screen saying that I was not being asked by someone I didn't know or out of the blue. So it's a nice layer of protection.
Yeah, I've not done it, but I've thought a couple times about it'd be a good little thing to put in the newsletter.
We have.
Oh, good. Because one of the ones that's really common, particularly again for people in our generation, is they find out something about your family, and then they call and say your grandson Rob is in jail, and we need you to. And
It's a shame. They're not likely to email me about my cat, but
yeah. Well, of course, my comment probably would be, they can stay there if they did anything wrong, but yeah.
Ken, I thank you so much for this. Unfortunately, I need to buzz.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to the next step. I think you've given us a lot of really good ideas. I'm heartened by the fact that we do some of them and we can do them better. And Steve, thanks for hooking us up to this. So really,
Thank you, Ken. Really appreciate your time.